Hello and welcome to the Swan Song Project Podcast. My name is Ben Buddy Slack and I'm the founder of the Swan Song Project and the host of this podcast. The Swan Song Project is a charity. We help people who are facing the end of their lives or dealing with bereavement to write and record an original song. We believe in celebrating lives, making memories and leaving legacies. If you'd like to find out more about the charity, you can visit our website, which is swansongproject.co.uk. The podcast features songwriters. Each episode I have a different songwriter on. I ask them to share with us one of their songs. We have a chat about how they wrote it. I ask them to share a songwriting tip, and I also ask them for a song that's meaningful to them in some way relating to bereavement. This episode features Jess Guise, and it's a beautiful conversation. It's very moving. She has lots of stories about her dad, who she's written a beautiful song about recently. I'm sure you're really going to like it. If you do, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. We've got lots more great guests coming up that you're not going to want to miss. But without further ado, here is Jess Guise on the Swan Song Project Podcast. Okay, today I'm here with Jess Guise. Thanks for joining me, Jess. Guess.
Guess Guise.
Guess Guise, yeah.
Lovely to be here.
all the alphabet, I'd say they're the two letters I'm most likely to confuse a J and a G.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can spell Gemma with a J or a G, can't you? But you can't spell Jessica with a G.
No,
it's ever been done.
No, that would be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe someone could try. Anyway.
Yeah. Interesting start to the podcast. I'm not going to edit this out because I think this is good. But yeah, for anyone new to the podcast, this is the Swan Song Project Podcast. Each episode I have a different guest on. We're going to talk about one of Jess's songs to start with. Then I'm going to ask Jess for a songwriting tip, and then we're going to talk about something meaningful to Jess in some way relating to bereavement. So over to you now, Jess. Which song of yours have you chosen to talk to us about today?
So I've chosen, this is the most recent song that I put out. I don't like using the word single for it because it feels a bit weird but it is a single. It's not on an album yet. It's a song called Wish that I wrote about my dad. I don't know how much you want me to say now. Say more later.
Yeah, we'll have a listen to it now and then we'll chat a bit more detail about it afterwards. So this is Wish.
You think about where I now live? I know you always love the sea. Would you like a little history? What would you say about how I now play? Just the way I learned from you. Because you see I have not improved. And what about him? Would you like how he sings? I'd like to think that you'd approve. And you'd forgive the tattoos. I wish you'd got old. I wish you'd got old. Wish I could have shown you what I'd be like when I grew up. There's a picture of us on the wall just above the desk where I'm writing this. When I'm stuck, I sit and look at it. I've lived half of my life without your advice. Years of trying to figure out things you should still be here to teach me about, and the best things can be is still a heart bittersweet. You know I got married last year. God, I left it like your hair turning white, the signs of age around your eyes, or its effect on your waistline. But I wish I could hear you complain about that. Wish I could still call you up when I'm sad. I wish I could apologize for the teenager I was before you died. But how could I have guessed how little time we had left? I promise you I learned from it. All this love you left me with, I wish you'd got old. I wish you'd got old. I wish I could ask you, Dad, have I made you proud?
Okay, beautiful. So that was Wish by Jess Guise. Yeah, it's a really powerful song, Jess, and really moving video as well. Yeah,
Thanks.
it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it was cold. When my husband was holding a mobile phone. I didn't have any budget for a video, so we weren't actually supposed to be doing a single take. That wasn't the idea, but we had lots of chops. But then when I watched it back, I was like, oh, that's quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love videos like that as well, where it is kind of like, it's not a big budget thing, but it just kind of it fits the song very well, doesn't it?
And we were very lucky with the sky. You know,
It's very
like you can't budget for the sunset.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, very beautiful. So yeah, what can you tell us about writing the song?
So it was a really hard process writing this song. So I wrote this song for my dad. His name was Stuart. And he was a big music fan. He was a guitarist. He had a beautiful voice himself. And he taught me to play. And he didn't write songs himself, but he got very enthusiastic when he discovered that I had started writing songs when I was 14. But when I say enthusiastic, I mean he thought I had potential, like he thought I was good at it. But he therefore thought it was kind of his job to help me get better at it. So he would do me like a whole page of notes sometimes. It was kind of brutal, but amazing. He died very suddenly of a heart attack when I was 18. It was a horrible situation. And I've basically spent for a few years, I couldn't really play the guitar at all, to be honest. It was too hard. And I play his guitars. That's one of his there. He left them to me. And then basically from the moment I sort of picked my guitar up again, I think I've been trying to write a song that he would like. Do you know what I mean? That would get no notes. That's what I've been working on. And of course I can never know, ever. And I've written a few other songs about my dad. So I wrote a song called Brother in Arms, which is about my big brother and me losing my dad. And I wrote a song called The Crying Kind. And I wrote The Crying Kind a long time ago, like just a few years. That was one of the first things I wrote when I started playing again. But I kind of, with Wish, I think I started writing it 2 or 3 years ago. Like it took years because I wrote a bit of it and I thought there was something in it, but I couldn't sing it because it just made me cry. And I'm trying to remember, I have been trying to remember, knowing that I was going to come and talk about it today, I've been trying to remember which bits I wrote first, do you know what I mean? And I think I had just the opening lines. So I started it once we'd moved here. We live by the sea now, left London in the pandemic. And I started writing it then, and I wrote a few lines, and then I got as far as the first chorus. I think I wrote half of the first verse, and I got to the line, "I wish you got old," and then I just broke down, and that was that. You know what I mean? So that sort of sat around for quite a long time as there's something there, but I kind of had to gather myself to look at it, because I knew it would be tough. Slowly over time, I kind of developed two verses. There's a line in it where I say, I got married last year. Like, I got married in 2019, and I put this song out now. So that's not been last year for quite a while, because the last verse eluded me for a really long time. And it was an interesting thing with songwriting. Like, sometimes because it's a very simple melodic structure, which I did on purpose because that's what my dad liked. And we'll talk about the other song that I'm going to talk about today, that was kind of an inspiration for this one in some ways, and that he adored that song. And one of the things he loved about it was how simple but beautiful it was. So the fact that the da, 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 that sort of simple verse line was really important to me. So it took me a while to realize I couldn't get the words to work in the last verse, and it took me bizarrely quite a long time to realize that I didn't have to stick to my own rules, that I could maybe mess around. It's not that different, but it's the timing slightly different. There are a few more bits in the last verse, and I had this weird block where I don't care at all what comes out, it just comes out. But with this one, I was like, no, it must be simple. So that last verse took me a really long time, and I eventually just gave myself permission. I think I've been for a walk on the beach and realized I just had to let go of this idea that it needed to fit, and then I could write what I wanted to write. So yeah, it was a slow burner, but when I finished it, I then was really pleased with how it came out. I played it before I'd finished it. I played it to my husband, who's also a songwriter, and he's quite a good gauge in terms of whether something's good. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast.
Yeah, go ahead.
And whether something's good or whether it's shit, and worth abandoning. And he was quite excited about it. And we messed around with the voicing on the guitar. So it's the same chords, but I've just moved them up the guitar a little bit. And that helped me free it up as well. I don't normally do that. I don't normally play songs to people unless they're finished. But I was struggling with it. So he didn't suggest very much. He didn't, I wrote it on my own, but just having played it to somebody gave me that sort of like, it's worth persevering feeling. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what else to say about it really. There's lots I could say about the words. They're all things I wish I could say to my father. I think that's pretty clear. Hopefully, if people have heard the song, the idea is pretty simple. It's a chat with him, and it's stuff I wish I could say to him. And specifically, it's a lot of the things I say are things that probably took me years of therapy to work out what's going on or whatever. But and that's the wonderful thing about songwriting, is you take all this experience and you have to try and make it small. You have to make it fit. So you have to be really precise with what you're doing, get it through the eye of the needle, as people say. So that was challenging, but I am really proud of it, and I do think that my dad would probably really like it. And there's also loads to say about the production as well, but I don't know if we're just doing the writing part now. But
yeah, we might get to some of that as well. One of the things I was going to ask you then, as you're talking, so the difficulty finishing the song, that's something I find quite a lot with people. We find it a lot in Swan Song as well. A lot of times, like the first verse or two, and the chorus kind of comes out quite quickly with people, and then it's like it's really hard to finish it. Yeah, and I don't know whether that's a consistent thing across songwriting generally, or whether when it's something that is emotional and is tied to a particular person, sometimes we wonder whether it's like a resistance to closing the song that makes it more difficult to finish. So I don't know if that's something that like you find with your other work, or whether this one was different in some way.
Really, this one was quite, I mean, it's really interesting. I think you're touching on a lot of stuff that is that pertains to the like tip that I would give anyone who's trying to write a song, which is the fear of something not being good is the biggest problem that I have. And when I used to write, I had a totally different structure in my head of what songwriting was. It's like a song either exists or it doesn't. Currently, it doesn't exist. There is no perfect good version of it that you're aiming towards. That isn't real. You either write it and it exists or it doesn't. And that was a really liberating, open-minded way of doing things. And then I think after I started putting things out into the world, and again, because I'm married to a very talented songwriter, I started to get this voice in my head that was like, better be good, better be good, it can't be shit. And that was really debilitating for me. And that's what stops me finishing songs. And I had a period of time where I wrote very little at all because of that voice. With this one, it was that voice that was stopping me, but it was because I really wanted it to be good enough for my dad. It was a very different, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I literally don't care at all. I know that he would like it. That's all that matters, So in some ways it was quite liberating, but at the same time, it was the same thing. I think the imagining other people hearing and disliking your songs is a massive creativity killer. But it's very different when the person you're imagining is a man you love very much who died long ago. It was a very different experience, but it's sort of the same thing. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think so. So again, it's something that we come up with, like that difference between writing for like an audience, which is made up of lots of different people, or writing for one person specifically.
Or even better, writing for yourself.
Or better writing for yourself.
I find writing for yourself, thinking no one's ever gonna hear it, quite often, that's when I end up. I'll start writing a song going, oh, this is just a silly thing that won't be anything. And then if I don't think it's going to go anywhere or anyone's going to hear it, quite often those will turn into my favorite songs. Because I feel freer.
Do you find that harder now you put more things out?
Definitely. I think, and there's a trade-off between the limiting effect of the fact that people might hear it for me, and I think I was always really scared of people doing like direct comparisons between me and my husband, when especially, most of my first record I wrote before I'd ever even heard his name. But people will do comparisons anyway. They go, oh, I can really hear his influence. I'm like, no, you can't, because I had never heard of him when I wrote that song. But cool, and that's always been, I think, a bit of a, for me, not always, but for the last however many years of writing, that's been a concern. He has influenced some things, and I'm more than happy to accept it when that is the case. It's just annoying when it's like, no, you're just imagining that. But so I think for me, putting things out into the world and the degree of the particular kind of attention that I would get, which I'm very, very grateful for, the fact that anyone is paying attention at all, it's amazing. But creatively, it's quite daunting. So the flip side of that, I think, is that it's partly just growing up and starting to hone your craft. I don't know that I would ever say I have a craft. It doesn't feel craftsmanship like the way that I write. It's a very sort of I write like confessional folk pop. That's what I've always called it. It's my feelings, and then I hone them. So I suppose that's kind of the crafty bit. But someone like Frank, or someone who is a professional songwriter and has been for a really long time, they might have a better idea they might think in terms of structure. I don't. I instinct in terms of structure because of what I listen to, I absorb. I don't think that way. But I think that there is a lot to be gained from understanding how a song works and raising the bar for yourself and criticizing your own work. I do think that I definitely did that with Wish. And I think it's a much better song for it. than some of the stuff that I just go, whoa, it's finished. Do you know what I mean? So it's a trade-off between the self-consciousness getting in the way and self-consciousness helping the end product be better. Like sometimes it helps, sometimes it hinders, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. What's your writing like practice like now? Do you like write consistent, or is it just when you feel like it? And
no, I've always said, I mean, because I don't, this is not the only job that I also am a psychotherapist. I'm training as a counselling psychologist. So I was an actor for 10 years. So this has never been my full-time gig. I adore it, but it's never been full-time. So it's always been something that I have allowed myself to do when it's happening. Do you know what I mean? So when I feel like it, like when I'm drawn to it or when I have an idea. So I've never really, maybe once in my life, last January, I had a bit of time, which is actually when I finished Wish. I had a bit of time that was clear in my diary. My husband was on tour. I had the house to myself. I have to have the house to myself. I hate it if anyone's listening. Can't do it. And I do need space. And in that, for some time in January, I was like, okay, you're going to finish this song, right? You're going to finish it. You are going to do that. So I did set aside time and make myself do it then. But generally, no, when things come to me, I don't write anything down pretty much ever, unless I'm really struggling like I was with Wish. I've never, ever written with a pen. So I do write with a pen. I don't write songs with a pen. I don't write anything down, which was always really annoying for my band members when we first started, because I didn't have any of the lyrics or chords or anything written down. So I just pick up the guitar and I use voice notes. So I'll record myself if I find something, or if I'm saying, I'll just record myself and I'll have these like 10-20 minute voice notes. And I'll keep playing and I'll listen back and I'll keep playing and fiddly diddly and see what I can find. And then at a certain point, I tend to go, that's enough now, right? I'm done with developing it for now. And then I'll listen to it out and about and around, and go back and repeat the process until the song is finished. So I almost never write anything down unless I'm really, really struggling.
That's really interesting. So
I think it's quite unusual, apparently.
Yeah.
It's just how I've always done it. Yeah.
And that's improvising all your lyrics as well as So I know a lot of people who do that for their melodies, that they'll just sing into the voice note and find bits they like. But
always come together pretty much.
Yeah.
The lyrics and the melody, they don't tend. I mean, the first round of lyrics anyway will tend to come with or partly dictate what the melody is. Not always. Sometimes it's and then I'll fill it up later. But quite a lot of the time, I'll hear a phrase, and that'll be. So, or I'll hear what the vowel sounds maybe almost are or something. So no, I don't. It's all improvised. But sometimes they're very much like I might be like singing the words that I see around me a little bit in order to fill space when I hear a melody, and then I'll come back. But every now and again, I think I try to rework old songs. Like I made a record when I was at school. Sorry, because I was 16. So, but there's some stuff in some melodies in there that I'm like, I really like that melody. It's just the words are, hilariously embarrassing. So I was 16, and I've tried to rework it, but I find that really tough because I've just never really done that. It's something I ought to work harder at, but I never want it to be work. Give it joy.
Does it feel hard separating it from what it was then, or is it something else about the process that?
As in the song, that is in those songs, what they were then.
Yeah, in terms of like using those old bits to do something.
Yeah, it's really annoying. It's like Peter Pan and his shadow. I'm trying to take it away, but the shadow is the essence of Peter Pan, dictates what the shadow is. So the words, however terrible they are, they dictated, they are that song, and I can't get it off. I can't separate them. Not well, anyway. So a couple of times I've succeeded, but I find that really hard to think of melody separately.
Yeah, I always love that idea again when I've heard people talk about that, like constantly, and I can do it with lyrics. I can have books and books of lyrics from years ago, and again, like absolutely hate looking back through the old ones because they're generally incredibly
so often
cringeworthy.
written down, they look terrible anyway. Lyrics, right?
Yeah.
Not doing. They're different. So yeah.
But then every now and then there's just a little bit, and you're like, but yes, so I love that idea of that as a practice,
Yeah.
or whether it's voice notes or whatever. But I've never been any good at doing it. Like I always I'll have stacks of stuff, and I always intended to be like, I'll go back through that at some point and filter through it, and I'm just always like, oh, I'll try and think of something new rather than doing it.
I mean, that's sort of how I am as well. I guess I've always believed. I think a lot of people get worried about losing stuff. But I've always believed if something's good, it'll stay in my head. Like for a long time, I barely even recorded these things. I just remembered them. I just trusted my memory. But I did have I was a professional actor for a decade. I have a good memory for words. So that, not from lots of other things, like dates, terrible at, but song words I could always remember. But as I've got older, I've got a little bit less cocky about that. So I always make sure I've got a recording of the full, most recent version of the song I'm working on. But yeah, no, never with a pen.
Yeah. And so do you set out with any intention of what you're going to write about, or do you just like, so I guess with this one, like you mentioned, you wanted to write a song for your dad, but with you in general, do you say, like, do you have like, oh, this is an idea for a song, or is it just, let's see what comes out?
So I have a song that I've written that will be on the next record, which is called The Soppy Stuff, which is about how I have so often tried to like sit and write a song that's about like a story song or a proper folk song or a song about somebody else. And by mistake, I'll just accidentally write a song about my feelings instead, because that's what comes out of me. Like, that's just what I know how to write. That's what I can do. Whereas, some people will craft these stories, and that's a very different thing. And I suppose if I thought about it differently, if I thought about this as like a craft that I was working on for my career in a different way, then perhaps, I'm not saying I couldn't do that, but I just have a limited amount of time that I can focus on this wonderful thing that I love doing. And I pretty much invariably will just end up accidentally writing a song about how I feel in that moment. So even with the song about my dad, I didn't sit down thinking this is going to be a song about dad, right? I was just playing an A chord when I wrote it originally, which is different to how I play it now. But and I just went, what would you think? And then my dad came into my head, and then I started writing the rest of the song. I hadn't gone, I'm going to write this song about that. The thing that appeared in my head sounded like him, and then the next line that came out was about him, and then that was it. I was screwed. That's what I was writing about. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't really, I know a lot of people who go through life, brilliant writers. My friend, do you have wonderful Hannah Rose Platt on here?
Yes, yeah, Hannah's been on recently. Yeah.
So she's a gorgeous girl. We went on tour together and we had a brilliant time, and she writes these incredible story songs, and we've talked about this extensively, she and I, over wine and on long car journeys. Like she writes these brilliant stories about quite often terribly spooky, brilliantly deathly ghost stories or something. She'll write story songs of things she's heard, and she'll collect them, and she'll go, well, that's a great idea for a song, that's a great idea for a song. I've never done that. Like, I go, oh, that thing's made me sad, I'm going to write about why I'm sad, like I do it differently. And Hannah talks about it, actually, it's quite interesting, as I can't remember whose analogy it was, but she said it's like a blender setting. I think she read it, and it was someone else's analogy that, different creativities require different people. Their output is on a different setting in the blender. So some of us just go, here are feelings. And some people, their feelings are embedded in stories and more complex things. Yeah. So I guess I'm very low setting on the blender. But that's like, there are about 20 songs in my head that I have started trying to write about someone else or about a story, or that I've started, but I just, they don't come out as easily for me. It's just the way that that's the kind of writing I have done. So it's what I am currently good. It's what I am capable of.
Yeah. I think it's a good awareness to have as well. And I think there's a lot of, I don't know, I think a lot of people think you have to write in a particular way. Like, they'll hear story songs and think, oh, I've got to write a story song. So they'll hear this type of song, I think I've got to write this type of song. Where I think the thing to really do, particularly like, so if you're like, a professional songwriter and your job is to write songs for particular things, then I guess you might have to work in all the different styles. But if you're writing for yourself and that's working for you, then having that awareness of this is the type of song I like to write. I kind of had but I started off doing lots of story songs, and then I got to a stage where I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be writing as many story songs. And then I kind of felt like I kind of pushed myself almost too far the other way, and then kind of like listening to other story songs, I really like these story songs, and I mean, like, that's okay, that's what you like doing. Do that rather than worrying about.
I think that's the thing that's really important, is that, like, and again, it comes back to this, it isn't quite the right way of phrasing it, but the song either exists or it doesn't, right? If that's what's coming out of you, if that's what's easy for you to write it. Don't worry about whether it's the right thing or what you should be doing, and especially I think this is a thing that I get quite innovated about as a girl, that girls' feelings or love songs or things like that are trivialized largely by male gatekeepers in the music industry, or have been for a really long time. Possibly even my dad used to say that to me, right? Who was very much a child. He was born in 1950, so he grew up, in his teens were exclusively in the 60s. So it'd be one of those boomers that was like, oh, nobody writes like that anymore. I mean, he wasn't, but he kind of was. And I remember him saying, how about you write a song that's just like not about a boy one time, Jess? And I was like, how about you write a song at all, Dad? Do you know what I mean? Like, those are my choices. Like, I write what is coming, and people resonate with it. I mean, Taylor Swift is the greatest example of this, and people they still deride her and put her down, but it's like, look how many people connect with her songs, because human experience, so much of it is about like how we feel about the other people in our lives. That's not profound. It's not silly, it's not trivial just because it's female and it's about love. And that really, that winds me up. Yeah. So I guess there's now a part of me that's like, screw you, I'm never going to write anything other than this. But actually that's not true at all. I do want to branch out sometimes, just for fun more than anything else.
Yeah. And it's finding that, like, what's, like, I always think authenticity is the most important thing in a song. So like, whatever that is for you, that's the thing to write about.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
it's also why for me I think like a lot of what I want it to sound like, hopefully most of my songs have some form of sense of humor in them. That's quite important to me, because that's the thing I think I am quite good at, is writing a song that's really honest but also quite self-deprecating. And so in Wish, it's the line about the tattoos that my husband has, or my dad's dislike of his growing waistline as he got older. He'd probably be really pissed off at me for putting that line in. He hated getting that. He was really vain, which I've inherited from him. And he hated it, but it's like, that's the price you pay for continuing to be alive, which is better than the alternative. So I wish that he was still about to complain about it. And that, for me, that sort of the slight jokes in some of my songs, that sounds like me. And when I try to just be po-faced or serious, then I'm like, it's just not, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. I think authenticity is like, just be yourself.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that I always love, is when there's a song which is like, it's heartfelt, but it's got that humor in it as well.
Yeah.
Because humor is such a kind of personal thing as well. I don't know, like, you kind of get a real sense of somebody by what they find funny. and particularly if it's in something emotional, and then there's just like those little bits, it's kind of I don't know, it feels like a really nice window into someone, I guess, isn't it? Like,
yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether it is something about, like, I mean, humor in difficult situations is one of my favorite things anyway. I love when something like a really serious situation and then just something silly happens, or someone says something funny. And same with emotional stuff, how it can just break that tension that comes with it. And I think in music, it kind of like, it can stop things getting too soppy in a way, or too like sentimental, if there's just something in it. And it's often very, because it's very real as well, isn't it? I think that's what
Yeah.
One of the things that's really good about
That's
it.
the thing. I think what is often funny is what is deeply human. You know, what is the very the stuff we don't always say, but that we all resonate with is often funny.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's the thing with music. It's all about, to me, it's all about resonating. Like that's what it's for. So yeah.
Yeah.
I
And I think
agree.
and like the level of detail in this song, I think it's one of those songs that like, and I was reading some of the comments on the YouTube video about, like how many people it just, connects exactly with them. And this thing comes up a lot about detail in songs, which is my favorite quote, which I don't know how many episodes of this podcast I brought it up on, but it seems to come up a lot. So it was a Leonard Cohen quote about,
Can't go wrong.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was something like your most specific answer will often be your most universal one.
Yeah.
Where he was talking about like if you have something that's really detailed and specific in your song, that's the thing which is most likely going to get the most amount of people. So I was thinking about like, the line about tattoos and stuff like that. Like other people might not have that exact same thing, but they'll have a version of it
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
it feel so real to them.
I completely agree. It's not the same thing, but there's something they want to be able to say that about.
Yeah.
And actually that is with this song more than any other song. You know, I've just been traveling around the country with wonderful Seth Lakeman for a couple of weeks, singing it every night. And without fail, people will come and talk to me about it afterwards and tell me about the people that it made them think of, numerous people every single night. And I've had such a wonderful response online for people doing the same thing, because that's where your brain goes. It goes to the person that you miss, that you wish you could speak to. So you just fill in the gaps. And some of the stuff, like those bits about the details about my dad, like his hair turning white and his eyes getting wrinkly and putting a bit of weight on, they're very specific to him. They were things he hated, but they're waiting for us all, or they're happening to us all. So that is, it very directly is both specific and universal, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I really love about it, that like, so it's interesting now to what we talked about, knowing that this probably wasn't like, I thought this might have been your starting point, but the I wish you'd got old line, and how that, like, because so many people fear getting old, whereas really it's, it is a privilege, and it's something that for the people in your life do hope that you get old, even if you might at the time might not feel like you want to get old.
It's funny, it wasn't where I started with the song, but it is the big lesson I learned the day my dad died, was that we are ridiculous. We have it backwards when it comes to age, especially in this country. We're obsessed with staying young, and it's like getting old is significantly better than the only alternative, which is dying. Like that has been very clear to me from the age of 18 onwards because of losing dad. So it is a position. It's something I say and have said all the time, for half my life. That's what I've felt about age. But it actually wasn't in my head when I started writing. I just wrote a few lines and then it just came out, because obviously it's been something I felt so long. But then, as I said, it just came out, and it was when I wish he got out, and then I just started crying and I was screwed. Like, you know what I mean? So, yeah, but that's also that, if the song, whilst you're writing it, it makes you cry, you probably know you're onto something that's worth it.
Yeah, that's probably a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was like, oh, fuck's sake, this is going to be really upsetting, but I have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a thing, as well, do you know Jason Isbell?
Oh, very well.
Yeah, like, he's one of my absolute heroes.
Yeah.
But I saw a thing of him talking about If We Were Vampires, one of his songs, which again is just like one of the most moving songs I've heard in my life. And him talking about playing that for his wife for the first time. And so I started playing it and I just started crying. And I just thought, how ridiculous is this that I'm crying over something I've just made up?
It's true. What's interesting, I think actually he I remember. Well, I don't need to get into that, but I have a story about that song when my husband sent it to me at a point. I was on a bus, and because Jason sent it to him, I think, and he sent it to me. We were on a bus. I was just on a bus in public, and I got about 2 lines in, and was just like, everyone, people on the bus were like, "Are you okay?" It's like, "Oh, I'm fine." It's so beautiful, but it does, again, vampires like captures something that I have absolutely felt about the person I love. Like, it's never going to be long enough but therefore it's magic, you know, that's and that is the lesson of grief as well, I suppose.
Yeah, it's such a remarkable song, isn't it? And I remember thinking that when he said that, like, I find it really funny the way he said it, like, I just made it up, and it's like you just made up the song, but the sentiment of the song is such a deep, real thing that.
Which is why I think the whole notion of like the muses exists, because sometimes people they're like, I can't possibly have just invented that. You know what I mean? Like, it can't have just come from me. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it comes from you. It just comes out, and you're like, where? And I didn't make it. Like, and it's not even in the same ballpark as a Jason song, but sometimes I'll just blurt a whole song out. There's a song called The Boy and the Thief, which is the first song on my last record, that I had to run home because it was appearing. You know what I mean? It was just appearing. I had to run home. I wrote the whole song within about half an hour. And there's a lot of words in that song, right? Lots of words in that song. And it just appeared. And I was like, where the fuck did that come from? Like, it's weird. But I think sometimes it's things just appear, but so you don't feel like you've made them up. But with something like Vampires, I can't really imagine what it must be like to distill that human experience that perfectly. I don't know. What that must have been like for him.
No, really interesting stuff. Let's move into section 2 now, shall we? This is where I ask my guests for a songwriting tip, and what often happens on this podcast is we get lots of good tips through the initial conversation, but I always like to ask you for one specific one. And you did mention one specifically earlier, didn't you? But yeah, so what's your tip for us today, Jess?
Well, the one I was going to say I have already sort of kind of mentioned, which is it's better that a song exists that didn't exist before. Do you know what I mean? So it's about, don't worry about it being good. Just write something and it will exist then, and it didn't exist before. And if it's shit, doesn't matter, you can do it again. Do you know what I mean? I think that was my major tip, is just write what's coming out. Don't worry about the should or anything along those lines. But obviously we've talked about that in some depth already, haven't we? So on lots of levels. So I guess another tip would be when I started writing songs, I don't do this anymore, but when I was 14, 15, started writing songs, what I would do is I would work out the chords to my favourite songs, which at that moment in time were mostly Goo Goo Dolls songs, which I think is a great place to start. And then I would just swap them over, just do them in a different order, and then write on top of it. So, because I knew I liked the sonics of it. So these are, and this is not because it's basically ripping off the chords, but then you change the order, then you're not ripping off the chord progression, and what you write on top of it is something completely different. Because especially for people if people are coming to songwriting when they're not musically trained, which was very much me, I have no musical training. Well, that's not true. I did grade 7 flute, but the flute's not very useful for writing songs. But I think finding something you like, working out how it works, like work out how to play it, and mess about with it and write something different on top and see what that feels like. And then you can take that. It probably then might just sound like a rip-off of that other song, but it's an interesting way to get used to writing in the first place. So I definitely accidentally rewrote Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls at least 3 or 4 times. And then you have to be really conscious that that's what you're doing. It helps you feel confident that you can, that you know that that's how that song was created, or that's how that song is crafted. So you can go away and do it yourself. So that for people who've never done it before, I think that's a really good trick.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think it kind of links to the other tip as well, in a way, doesn't it? Of just you know, like making songs happen. So like, even if you do feel like actually this is a bit of a rip off of Iris, it's still I've learned something from it.
Exactly, it exists now and it didn't, and there might be something in it that leads on to something else. You know, that will be the original, like a lyric or a little riff or something.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
And I think that studying songs that you like is really good advice as well, of like picking them apart and whether you use them yourself or just that kind of awareness of like, oh, I really like this song. And because I remember having that of like, you know, listening to different songs, and when I'd started then picking them apart, being like, oh, actually these are very similar chord sequences in lots of these songs that I like, or they're using a similar type of chord, or what's going on there. Maybe there's
it's a really good thing. I have a wonderful Patreon community who support me there. It's a small gang of brilliant people who are super supportive, and I do a video every Monday, either a song of my own or a cover. And it's amazing how many are like, God, that's an extraordinary song. How on earth, God, how do I play it? And then you go C, G, A minor. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it doesn't matter. None of that matters at all, because you can play with that in production, right? So the melody and the words, unless it's a guitar-based, riff-based song, which actually some of mine are, bizarrely, for someone who's really shit at the guitar, like quite a few of them are. And the guitar part's quite integral, but that doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't have to be. You don't reinvent the wheel. Just ride the wheel.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, brilliant. Do you finish everything you start, or do you have bits and pieces of songs now?
No. I have a lot of finished songs in my back pocket, actually. I have a lot of songs. There are some songs that I will finish and then abandon because I think they're rubbish. There are some songs that I will finish, play to one person, and they will think it's rubbish. I will then abandon it for 10 years and then be like, "Screw you! I think it's great." But there are definitely more songs that I sort of half finish. Or there are 3 folk songs that I've got about 2 lines of. And I've had about 2 lines, a guitar part and 2 lines, and I've had those 2 lines for about 6 years in all 3 cases.
Yeah.
Because whenever I come back to it, a song about my feelings comes out instead. Which again, I've just had to kind of embrace. What comes out of you is what you should write. But no, I don't.
Do those ones that stick with you? Is there anything particular about them that is it something that you really like the little bits that you've got, or is it just that it just keeps coming back to your head, or is it like there's something in it that you feel needs pursuing? Or
I think it's quite simple, actually. It's if I remember it, then I think that, because there's loads of songs I've written that I know I've just forgotten before I started recording everything. They're just gone, and I think I worried about that for a little bit, but then I was like, if they were any good, you'd have remembered them. Because there are other songs, there's a couple of songs that I wrote when I was 18, so decades ago, depressingly. I can remember every word, and the words aren't great, but I can remember the whole song because I don't forget songs that I like. That's the way my brain works, and that's different for everybody, obviously, but for me, if I remember it, then I kind of figure that's probably worth paying attention to. And sometimes it's, I don't know, sometimes it is like a bit of it, and I'm like, well, the verses are crap, but the chorus is great. But yeah, my barometer or my sort of yardstick is, if I remember it, then it's probably worth thinking about again.
Yeah, there's something keeping it in your
something
consciousness,
keeping it kicking around. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
I don't know if that quite answered your question. But...
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, that's it's what I'm really fascinated with. And when people talk about songs that take years and years to write, and how often that's not sitting writing on it 8 hours a day, but it's like that song's been.
It's just
there's something there which you just can't really get rid of and keeps coming back to you, and
absolutely,
it is kind of fascinating, isn't it?
True with Wish, with the song that we're talking about today, and it was different because I had to put it on ice because I can't be crying all the time, like sometimes you have to be able to get on with your day, but it's not that it took me that long to write it because every time I sat down to try, nothing happened. It's that it just stuck around, and when I felt like I was going to be able to do it, that's when I did the work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's it been like? Obviously, you mentioned about how nice the audience reaction's been to Wish, but what's it been like for you actually performing it? And does it get easier the more you do it?
So I'm fortunate in that, and people ask me this quite a lot afterwards. They're like, how do you do that? Like, how do you stack? Because it's a fine line between connecting with it so that you're performing it well, and connecting with it so that you're in floods of tears and you ruin the rest of your set. But Do you know what? Honestly, I'm excited every time I get to it in my set because I'm so proud of it and I can see my dad. It's like, and I'm always playing his guitar. And I might cry now, but like in the room with all those people that I'm sharing it with, I'm so proud that I'm doing that for him, that I really look forward to that point in the set. I really look forward to it. And I know I can always feel, I'm not saying everybody loves it, but like there's always some people who are connecting. There's pretty much always somebody who's having a cry, even if that somebody is me. Do you know what I mean? Like it's an emotional moment in the set. And I thus far I've been warning people of that, because it can be quite difficult if something like that is, if you've recently lost someone or something like that. I think it's only fair to say this is a grief song, like fair warning, but I've loved it. I think honestly I'm fortunate in that I have professional acting training, right? So I trained as an actor, so my sort of emotional use of my emotions as a tool for performance is something that I'm very, very used to and comfortable with. And I know I can tell when I'm tipping a bit too far, and I can tell when I'm not tipping far enough. I've done shows. I did a play where I had to have a full, and it's not fake, it's real. The only way to do this is real. I had to have a full breakdown every day. Sometimes twice a day, in this play that I was in a few years ago, and it's really draining and it's really hard, but I can do that. I have that. I've learned that ability. So the inverse is also true. Do you know what I mean? I'm not very good at stopping myself crying when I'm not in front of people, and there's no one, but on a stage, I can do that. I can gauge my own feelings and push them or pull them a little bit because I have that experience. So to some extent, I think the acting training really, really helps. But really, it's mostly that I just think of my dad and try not too much. So if I think about him too much, then I'm screwed. Then I go. But I think about him thinking that this is really cool, because he would. So for this tour, I was on tour with Seth Aikman, who I just think is amazing and I loved. And I don't think my dad ever heard of him because I'm not sure he was working really. Actually, he must have been, but I only just put out Kitty J when my dad died. But my dad would just think this was fantastic, right? So that's what I think about, is so that I'm thinking of my dad, but I'm not just thinking about the loss. So thinking of him, but I'm not necessarily thinking about the pain in every word that I say. So it's a fine line. So that's kind of how I've done it so far. The danger for me is not so much, I think, that I'll tip over. It's that my self-preservation will kick in and I won't think about it enough, and I'll go into autopilot, and then I won't be connecting with the song. Like that is, I'd much rather have a little cry on stage than not do it properly. So, for me, that seems more important.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of the acting training being but it makes a lot of sense.
It's useful. It is useful in that capacity.
Yeah.
It's a very different job singing your own stuff or playing a character, but sometimes that emotional control is really, I'm a very emotional person. Like I'm a big crier. So having that to fall back on is quite helpful.
Yeah, it's something I do find it really interesting, the way performers, the ability to hold it together when you're performing compared to other situations. And I guess, like I always say, people ask me about Swan Song sometimes and how I hold it together. And like I'm generally fine when I'm in a session with somebody.
Yeah.
But then what happens for me a lot is I'll be doing a session with someone writing the song and it's really emotional, and I'll feel all right doing that. Then I'll get home and listen to it again, and then I'll just start crying. So it's like that kind of different setting where you're like, you're not working in a way you can just be like open to it.
And I guess what's interesting there with what you're doing, because in my other job I'm a therapist, and like people always say that to me. They're like, how do you do it? How do you hold all those negative things? And I mean, the answer is a lot of the time it's not negative at all. It's wonderful. But But it's the same thing. You're there to hold space for someone else. So you don't think about yourself in that same way. And that's also true when you're performing. You're holding that room for everybody else. It's about their experience. Your job is to make them feel comfortable, actually. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In some ways, it's oddly similar.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think there's that balance between your professional skill set that you're using it and your emotions. So like whether that's something that I find a lot with performing and with Swan Song stuff, where it's like you can, because part of you is thinking about, right, has to be aware of, am I playing the right chords, am I doing this? Like there's a certain practical element, and which then merges with the emotional level that you're putting out as well.
Yeah.
Whereas
sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, I guess like when you sat at home and listening to something or doing something like that, it's like you've not got that other level of your self working. You're just letting your emotions go with it.
I mean, people have often asked me because both the people in my marriage are songwriters, and they're like, "What's it like hearing him sing about other women and stuff?" It's like, I know what's going on in his head. Is it G now? It's G now. Fine. But that person's shouting a bit loudly. That's quite annoying. Like I know that he's not going, "Wow, I miss that ex-girlfriend." Yeah. I also do it, right? That's not. You inhabit the song, but that doesn't mean you mean what you meant when you wrote it. That doesn't mean that. Songs change for the songwriters.
Hi, my name is Deb, and my husband Rich was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia at the age of 50. We were invited to write with the Swan Song Project about memories Rich has, and he wanted to include things in everyday life that mean a lot to him. We met Ben a few times to chat with what he wanted to put in the song and the type of music he wanted to put the words to. Music is a massive part of Richard's life. We were also invited to the recording studios, which he absolutely loved. The song is amazing. Everybody loves it. It's just Rich. And it means so much to us because due to his diagnosis, he will lose his voice eventually, but we will always have it. Please donate to the Swan Song Project to help more people like ourselves and write a song to keep forever. But I'm a happy man. Love my life and do the best I can.
Let's move into section 3 now, shall we? This is where I ask my guests for a song that's meaningful to them in some way related to bereavement. And you alluded to it briefly earlier. But what I want to do here for anyone listening to the podcast who's not familiar with the song, I'll put the link in the description. So I'll ask Jess to introduce it in a moment, and then if you want to, you can pause us here, go listen to that song, and come back, and Jess can tell us a bit about it. So which song did you choose for us for this section, Jess?
I chose the extraordinarily beautiful song I Find Your Love by Beth Nielson Chapman.
Brilliant. So yeah, if you're not familiar with the song, you can pause us and go and listen to it. Or listen to it later. I would recommend listening to it either way because it's a beautiful song. So yeah, why did you choose this one, Jess?
So there's a sad story for this song, and this song I can't listen to without crying. I did do a cover of it for my so speaking to everything we've just been talking about, where I'm sure that it was hard for Beth to sing originally, but now she can. I still can't. I get 2 lines into the refrain and I'm in floods of tears. And I tried to do it for my Patreon and just cracked up. But this song, so my dad's mum, my nana, she died about 3 months before my dad did, which was good timing in some ways because she didn't obviously live through his sudden death. But it also meant that we as a family were talking about grief a lot. At that time, we were talking about death and how we would like to respond. We had conversations I had a conversation with my dad about how he would want us to deal with his death, like not in a sort of morbid, formal way, but just we were talking about Nana having grieved my granddad for my whole life. And my dad said things like, I would want people to be happy and to have another life. And so we had those conversations. And around the same kind of time, the film Calendar Girls came out, which this song features in, which is how we as a family discovered Beth Nielson Chapman, who is an amazing songwriter just across the board. She's extraordinary. And Dad I didn't go with him, but he and my stepmom, they came home from seeing that film, and he bought the soundtrack straight away for this song. And he played it to me, I remember, in the lounge, which is where he would die a few months later. And he played it to me there. It's going to crack me up now. And he just talked about how simple it is. The simplicity of the melody and the clarity and precision of the words. And that's what I have been aiming for ever since, right? And Wish is the closest I've ever got. So really, she basically is the gold standard. This song is the gold standard for my dad's. So we then, when he then died a few months later, the song took on an additional significance. And losing my nana was really hard, but she was old, and she it's not true, she hadn't been. It was still a bit of a shock. It happened quite quickly, and it was really difficult, but it wasn't anything in comparison to the shock of my dad dying. He was 54. He was a rowing coach. He'd been on a cycle race that day. Like, it just, you know what I mean? The dealing with it was a very different thing. So that song took on some extra significance at that moment in time. So and I think we played it at the crematorium, plus some Dire Straits, and we had Queen at the funeral, and we had also, my dad was a big music guy. We had live music at the funeral party and stuff. Like, we had lots of music. Music was everything. But that particular song, plus there's a couple of others, but that one is the one that I just can't listen to still without.
Yeah.
I do listen to it, but only when I want a good cry. Yeah. But it is just extraordinary because it is a really deeply sad song, but it's happy too. It's about connecting with that person, and still feeling their presence, which is what music does for me and my dad. That's when I most commonly feel like he's still kicking about, is when I'm playing, especially when I'm playing songs about him on his guitar, right?
Yeah.
So it's about that, and it's it's about nature too. And my dad was a big nature lover, so it's a beautiful song.
It's absolutely stunning song. It's another one where I feel like it just captures, like we were talking with Vampires and with Wish as well. It's a song that captures something which so many people relate to. Yeah. And it's done in that, like I said, such like simple beauty to it, but makes it feel so. Like, I can't imagine anyone listening to that and not getting it and not being moved by it. Yeah, it just feels so. And as you say as well, it's like, it is sad, but it's also beautiful. Yeah, it's finding the beauty in the sadness.
Exactly.
Which can be hard to do, but is often the way people want to get to, isn't it? And what people would probably want their loved ones to do too.
Yeah, well, and that's sort of that was the conversation I had with my dad about this song, was about what he would want for my stepmom or for us, about being able to move on with our lives. I haven't moved on. I don't think that's the thing that you do. I don't move on. Like, I'm still there in that day quite a lot of the time, but I carry it with me, and I can't not do that. For me, just accepting that is really quite important. I will never get over it. I don't think you do get over grief. You learn how to walk with it. You learn how to carry it. But part of that is seeing, being able to see a kingfisher or a red kite, these are my dad's favorite birds, and not just cry, right? Being able to see them and say, "Hi, Dad," and that it's always sad, and it always hurts, and it always will, I think, but it's lovely now, and it was lovely. It's always been lovely, but the lovely kind of the connection, the reconnection kind of tips over, and that's what the song's about. It's about finding someone in a moment, a flash of a smile, or some element of nature that reminds you of them.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking then, as you were talking about, is that it feels like even though like it is sad these moments at times, but that connection is what's so important. Even if the connection is hard at times, like you'd rather have that connection and feel sad about it than
Absolutely.
not have the connection to the person at all anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, but some people often say it's like, I don't want to get over it. That's not.
Yeah.
I want it to still hurt because that keeps him, as long as it's degrees, right? Grief is. There's lots of wonderful sort of metaphors about grief, but the waves maybe get smaller, or they get less common, but they don't get any less wavy. They don't get any less like salty. Like you still feel the same thing, just for less time and less often. But that feeling is horrible and it hurts, but it is because you loved them. So if you didn't feel it anymore, I don't know what that would mean. Like that wouldn't make any sense to me. I like feeling it. Sometimes I seek it out because I want to connect with my dad.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing, Jess. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I was just thinking as well how kind of like, obviously that this was the song that was so important to him at that time, and it being a song about bereavement, like if it had been, and then how kind of like nice it's been for you to have that as the song to work towards, that kind of aim. Like if this had been a completely different song which wasn't about anything as profound or beautiful, it might have been very different.
It might have been very different. Yeah, that is true. I mean, there were the other one, and I've been playing this on tour as well. The other song that my dad loved was, there were lots of songs he loved. He was a massive music fan, but the other sort of simplicity song that sort of ticks these boxes was a song called Who Knows Where the Time Goes by the very great Sandy Denny, which I'm sure you know. And she was like 19 or something when she wrote that song, which is just embarrassing for the rest of us. Do you know what I mean?
It's outrageous, isn't it?
It's just awful. But there's a real sadness with that song as well, knowing what then happened to her, that she died so young. But it's the simplicity of it again. So those are the two songs that I've always had like as these sort of totems of what I should be.
North Stars.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, beautiful songs. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Jess. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you for having me on. It's lovely to talk about these things.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'll put all the links in the description for all of your social media and everything like that. And people can check out Wish and everything. And is that the plan for that to be on an album upcoming? Or is that just kind of?
I need to finish it.
Yeah.
I've got about half of it, or 2/3 roughly, in the pipeline in terms of started recording, and there's like one or two songs I need to just finish. So that speaks to what we've been talking about. But yeah, this one was ready to go and I wanted to put it out into the world. So it will be on an album, which hopefully will be out next year. Well, will be out next year. Let's say that.
Good stuff. So yeah, everyone follow Jess's pages and keep an eye out for the album when it comes out. Thanks again, Jess, and thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'll be back with another episode soon.